Hello and welcome to Game Changer. I'm Mariam Zia. Tonight we will be talking about a challenge that Pakistan has been facing for decades now. That is the challenge of terrorism. And in the recent days, we have seen an uptick in terrorist attacks, especially when we talk about Balochistan. The rise in terrorist threats and, of course, terrorist attacks is a serious challenge that Pakistan is facing at this point in time. And from attacks on soldiers to bombs, bomb plots at on the Jaffar Express, these threats are rising each day. The terrorism, when we talk about in the context of Pakistan, has left deep scars on Pakistan, whether we talk about the human cost or the economic cost. Of course, there are many dimensions to it. We will be discussing all different dimensions and aspects in today's program. We will be also talking about the shift that we are witnessing in the recent days, which is in the kinetic strategy as far as military leadership is concerned, and how this is going to be impacting the terrorist threats in Pakistan. And when we talk about the international role and role of international organizations, there is a welcome step that is by the US State Department, who has of course designated BLA as a terrorist organization. And now is the time that the regional countries also stand behind Pakistan, and of course we fight against this menace of terrorism and fitnatul Khawarij. In today's program, we'll be talking about Pakistan's war against terrorism, what needs to be done, and the importance and significance of the role of regional as well as global actors against these terrorist threats that are emanating from across the border. To discuss this and more, we are honored to be joined by senior analyst, AVM retired Ijaz Malik. Welcome to the program. We are also joined by former ambassador, Mr. Ali Sarwar Naqvi. Welcome to the program. And we are joined online by Rear Admiral retired Faisal Shah. Welcome to the program. AVM Ijaz, let me start with you. Of course, when we talk about the terrorist threats, I want your take on especially the recent upsurge that we have witnessed in terrorist attacks, especially in just the past 2 or 3 days. Our forces killed 47 Indian-sponsored Khawarij, and they also recovered major weapons from these Khawarij. How do you see this upsurge in the recent days, and what are the factors behind it?
Obviously, first and foremost is, and it remains, the Indian involvement. And once we have gone through a recent, armed conflict in the Marka Baka or Operation Bunyan Marsus with them.
Marka Haq.
After that, thanks for correction. And after that, the Indian leadership, time and again, they have said that the Operation Sindoor, which they launched after a false flag operation, that continues. So this is actually the continuation of the same Operation Sindoor in sub-conventional domain. So that is how it has intensified, because their ultimate aim is to bleed Pakistan and to discredit the state of Pakistan, particularly in Balochistan that we are discussing today. And obviously, once there is an augmentation of the resources from our sponsorship from India, we see its manifestation in every now and then in the news, and the situation on ground in Balochistan is definitely where we had to generate our response, a proportionate response. And we have seen, if there is a surge in the militancy, there is a surge in our operations also to give them a befitting response. So this is how we stand today.
And do you think we are moving now towards more kinetic measures rather than culmination of both kinetic as well as non-kinetic measures?
Well, obviously, we are doing kinetic operation out of compulsion. If the people who do not respect or recognize the constitution of Pakistan or the state of Pakistan, against them what option do we have? Because they are continuing their operations not against law enforcement agents, our operators, but against the innocent civilians. They will just stop any transport and take down people and gun them down. So we have
even yesterday it happened that there was another, of course, plot for a blast at Jaffar Express.
Exactly.
But at the same time, my question is that with these kinetic measures being taken, and do you think that there is a fear or concern of resentment amongst the locals?
Yes, actually.
And how do we fight that?
Exactly, it's a very valid question. While kinetic application is a requirement under, as I said, under compulsion, but it can only be made sustainable if we fight that narrative. For example, a false narrative of an exaggerated sense of deprivation in Balochistan. There may be certain areas where obviously the Federation may have to do more, but it would be naive to say that we have not given enough resources. If you see in past 2 decades, Federation of Pakistan has given at least 2 very massive financial packages for the development and socio-economic uplift of Balochistan. The opportunities are being created, for example, CPEC and Gwadar. But instead of letting them happen and let these development happen, actually the same development which can bring the changes in the life of local people, these are being targeted.
And they are being sabotaged. I'll be circling back to this very important point. But Mr. Naqvi, when we talk about terrorism and its resurgence in Pakistan, of course, there are reports that indicate that TTP remains the single biggest factor when we talk about cross-border terrorism in Pakistan. And Pakistan has time and again tried for diplomatic engagement. Do you think there is hope for engagement as far as Pakistan's diplomatic engagement in regards to Taliban interim government is concerned, or do you think we have reached a kind of a dead end?
You see, terrorism is a multi-pronged problem. There are many aspects to it. One is the external factor that was just mentioned. The other is the local population. So we have to look at those things before we talk about discussions with the Afghan government, Taliban interim government. Now, we have a long history of dealing with terrorism. We are the only country perhaps which has dealt with terrorism over the years in a very concerted fashion. We had the Zarbiyas and then the Radul Fasad.
And now recently announced in June 2024 Azm-e-Istehkam.
Yes, Azm-e-Istehkam. So we have done various operations against terrorist centers, terrorist hubs and terrorist organizations. I think the key point here is to persuade the local population to dissociate themselves from the terrorists. When a terrorist comes and rents a house, or and he starts bringing in arms, the local people in the neighborhood know what is happening, and they must denounce that terrorist. Otherwise, we keep on carrying out military operations, but the local population gives them support.
And we have recently witnessed that as well, that the tribal leaders recently gathered, especially when we talk about South Waziristan, and they have reaffirmed their resolve to stand shoulder to shoulder with the security forces until the elimination of menace of terrorism. But coming back to the point of course, this remains an important factor that you highlighted. But how significant is these Taliban sanctuaries or the safe havens
Yes.
that Taliban government is providing in Afghanistan, and since we still have a very porous border, it is very easy for them to target target Pakistan.
Yes, but you see, I think that the Afghan Taliban government is not going to throw out the TTP. They are ideologically of the same
Cousins or brothers,
mindset,
yeah.
and they both want a Sharia government, which Pakistan cannot do anymore, because we are living in the 21st century and we must have a system.
And that concept, the very concept of Sharia government, is against the very essence of Islam as well. We have to remember that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is Islam being distorted to create the impression.
Against the education of women, yeah.
Exactly. Against
many factors.
Any liberal society has so many features that have to be there, and the Taliban are against it. The TTP, which is Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, so they are also Taliban, and they are against it simply because they cannot have the control of the population the way they want it to be. It's a question of, it's a struggle for power. It's not a question of Islam, because everybody is Muslim. Who are they talking about? So,
they are using it as a leverage against Pakistan.
yes, I mean, as a leverage against Pakistan and for gaining political power in the localities and then moving forward to bigger objectives. And that we have to stop, because they are anti-state and they are disrupting the entire structure of the state. So, that is why the government is determined to carry out kinetic action, and kinetic action has its validity as well. So, we have to deal with this on multiple levels and in multiple ways. And dealing with the Afghan government, I think we can of course continue negotiations and discussions, but I don't think that they are going to make, personally, it's my opinion, that I don't think they are going to make any effort to deprive them of the sanctuaries that they have provided. So, we have to accept that fact. I think the government should realize it.
And what are the reasons behind it? I'll be coming back to you. But let me bring in Mr. Rear Admiral retired Faisal Shah into the discussion. Faisal Saab, when we talk about the recent, of course, documentation by UN Security Council, BLA's Majid Brigade is now documented by UN Security Council as coordinating operations with the TTP. In your opinion, how does this alliance change the threat calculus for Pakistan?
Thank you very much for having me in program. Well, even if it was not connected, for us, they both were terrorist organizations, and we were fighting against both of them because they had the same agenda of creating chaos and creating troubles for Pakistani government and for Pakistani people. So either they align themselves or they don't align themselves. Ideologically, they are together, or in motivation, they are together. That doesn't matter, actually. The problem is that both of them are operating inside Pakistan, and they are both kind of menaces for us, and we need to get rid of them. I agree with both the participants, Ambassador Naqvi and AVM Ijaz, for whatever they said. But I would also like to highlight that why should we expect our enemies not doing what they are doing? I mean, this is their agenda. They are supposed to do it. So we need to actually, while fighting on the external front, we need to have introspection also, and we need to look internally also. And I think government is doing the right job right now, because they are focusing on these areas where these terrorists are hiding themselves or carrying out atrocities against people. And government is now focusing on improving the governance in these areas, and that is a good sign. In addition to that, I would recommend that the government should also look into the possibility of including people of Pakistan into this war. The whole country was together in May against India, and that's how we won that conflict. Now we are at war, and it's a war of everybody in Pakistan, not only of law enforcement agencies or the government of Pakistan. It's the war of people of Pakistan. So people of Pakistan should also be included in all this. They should be made aware of whatever is happening, whosoever is doing what, and whatever we need to do, they need to become part and parcel of this whole campaign.
Right, very rightly pointed out. And do you think that Azm-e-Istikam, which was launched in June 2024, do you think it is serving its purpose in this regard?
It has that element, what I'm talking about, but it has to be more pronounced now. We see the example of Sri Lanka, which has been the only country which has defeated terrorism successfully. And during their campaign against terrorism, if you read, people, government and armed forces, they were all together. People became eyes and ears of government and the armed forces. And whenever there was some unusual activity in any area, they would report it to the law enforcement agencies or the government agencies. And that's how that was tackled. Again, our neighboring country, Iran, has that system, that people become eyes and ears of the government and the law enforcement agencies, and any unusual activity is reported to them because it's for their own safety. They understand that it's for their own safety. So that's how people of Pakistan need to be made understood, that this is for their own safety. If they remain aware of their surroundings, whatever is happening around them, and if they find anything unusual, they should report it promptly. There should be reporting stations. There should be reporting contact numbers displayed everywhere. So the people should have access to those numbers and those channels where they could report unusual activities. It has to be further pronounced. It is already there, but it needs to be pronounced further.
Right, right. Of course, rightly pointed out. And AVM Ijaz Malik, of course, Mr. Faisal has alluded to very significant point that the involvement of people remain an important factor when we talk about this menace of terrorism. And how welcome, in your opinion, is the step by these tribal leaders in the recent days that we have witnessed, that they have alleged to stand behind our forces. And of course, this is very important because many of these proxies are now within the people of Balochistan. They are residing within those areas. So that is why we have to take kinetic measures, kinetic strategies in those areas. So how significant is that step? And also I want to take on the point that we discussed earlier with Ambassador Naqvi about TTP sanctuaries. Should Pakistan keep on engaging with Afghanistan, and in what manner moving forward?
Well, your second question first. I think we need to revisit our Afghan policy because whatever we have been dealing with after the takeover by
August 2021,
that hasn't worked out well. You know, they have launched a kind of economic terrorism against us. You know, the dollar smuggling, and then the smuggling of the products that we even import from other countries through legal means, and they are being smuggled out of Pakistan. So we need to exercise our leverage, which we enjoy, being the only lifeline for Afghanistan. They need to understand, and we should, you know, engage them at diplomatic level. And of course, wherever required, we have to do the kinetic operations as well. But we need to understand that at the operational level, the environment and the challenges are different in Balochistan as compared to KP. While there, you know, there could be certain commonalities, but in case of KP, the TTP, they are, you know, supporting their own brand of, you know, Islam, which is not acceptable to people, even the local people. Yes. And secondly, there is a, you know, convergence of interest, external, obviously in both cases, and the you know, trade, illicit trade of arms and smuggling and other criminal element. So, they complement each other against state of Pakistan, because lawlessness it helps everybody's interest there except for the state. Whereas, in case of Balochistan, what we need to do proactively, that we need to engage the majority of people who are with Pakistan, who are who wants to be a peaceful citizen of Pakistan. We have to engage those neutral elders, those tribal leaders, and let them play their role. In my humble opinion, we lack control, because the people who are sitting in Quetta, they do not truly exercise authority all over Balochistan. While they may be technically the representative of people, but then there are areas and districts where local people who are not in political power right now, they enjoy because of their tribal influence, they enjoy more control in their respective districts or divisions. So, we need to engage them also. And secondly, we need to do like we did after the APS attack. There was a national action plan. The kinetic part of national action plan was even then implemented very well. That is how we had almost a relief for 10 years. Yes. But the capacity building of the local governments, the capacity building of local law enforcement agencies, the governance which can negate that space to people who fall prey to these externally supported militants. And lastly, we need to work even in our educational institutions to de-radicalize people. It is not only few thousand people, as we normally keep hearing and repeating, who have taken up arms against the state. We see its impacts and its tentacles even in the universities and the colleges, where innocent students are being radicalized against government of Pakistan, against state of Pakistan, despite being there was a study we did in 2011. At that time, there were 2 packages already given to Balochistan, and the amount of Pak rupees in multi-billion packages was so phenomenal that at that time, if the entire population, if you divide by entire population of Balochistan, every Balochi would have had his or her share in tune of 11 lakhs per person. So, where that money has gone, we do not see that kind of development. The only infrastructure development is where army is supporting the cadet colleges, the medical complexes and other projects. So, because in case of Balochistan, it is not ideology, it is the CPEC, Gwadar, which is being targeted, while they want this region to be unstable. So, it is not only Afghanistan or India, there are certain other countries also whose interest in their reckoning would be compromised if CPEC is operational. So, we have to really take the full spectrum of threat and then apply a correction in terms of operational, which is maybe the kinetic operation in short to medium term, but in the long term we have to meet all these challenges which I highlighted.
Of course, and these include of course Madaris reforms and other aspect, and the youth of Balochistan and KP, that remains an important factor that needs to be addressed.
Yes, in case of Balochistan, you see, you do not see that kind of branding of Islam over there.
Yes.
The BLA or Majid Brigade, they would appear in military fatigues. Yes. They are projecting themselves because the India has built narrative like that they are separatist movement. So, they are more of, they claim to be guerrillas.
And now there are reports of them being funded and trained by Israel as well. There are some recent reports by
there is an
yes.
Indo-Israel nexus that we know, it is a known fact. So, we need to concentrate and apply correction both in kinetic as well as in non-kinetic domain?
Of course, and Ambassador Naqvi, when we talk about these kinetic as well as kinetic measures, earlier we also discussed about Azm-e-Istihkam that was launched, and it talks about kinetic as well as diplomatic push against these militants and Khawarij, which includes Afghan-based militants as well. Do you think this twin track diplomacy or strategy is realistic given the current geopolitical environment that we are living in?
Yeah, this is a good point. I want to talk about it. You see, we have to also activate all the international organizations and the international forums that are involved in this kind of problem, dealing with this problem. One is the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, in which terrorism is one of the main objectives in their charter. And in the SCO, we have China and Russia, plus Pakistan, India, and then the Central Asian states. So this is a regional forum which can be used to coordinate action regarding terrorism. Number one. Number two, there is the Pakistan, China, Afghanistan trilateral forum in which we can discuss terrorism, and there we can deal with Afghanistan at the diplomatic level in the presence of China, which would be greatly helpful. And then we have had the visit of the Iranian president, and we have coordinated with him. The government of Pakistan and the Iranian delegation has coordinated matters relating to terrorism. I presume that they have dealt with terrorism as one of the agenda items on their talks. So there has to be an international and regional approach which we should activate. That's not all. I was the first one to mention people's involvement, and I think this is extremely important, and much has been said about it by the other panelists. And apart from all that, you see the BLA and the others, they have to be dealt with in different ways. One is, of course, the TTP, which is in the KP area and also in more in KP than in Balochistan. And in Balochistan, you have the other BLA and all. It is good that the Americans have declared BLA as a terrorist organization, and we should move for other Western countries to do that also. And India is the troublemaker in this.
And BLA is a proxy of
yes,
India.
And we have to deal with that because Indians are causing trouble here. We need to make the other countries aware of what Indians are doing.
Other regional countries as well as Western countries.
Yes, of what India is doing. And so it is not going to be solved next year or the year after. It will take time, but we have to develop an entire strategy for dealing with terrorism at the multifarious forums and in multifarious manner that we can think of.
Of course, a multi-pronged strategy is required as far as dealing with menace of terrorism is concerned. Rear Admiral Faisal, when we talk about, of course, terrorism and how to deal with it, like AVM Ijaz alluded to, very important point about the governance issues and the lack of capacity building. I want to take on NACTA. It was initially envisioned as the central counter-terror body. But it still suffers from a lot of budget constraints and a lack of full political backing or other capacity building issues as well. In your opinion, what kind of structural reforms are required? Okay. Let me take this question to AVM Ijaz. AVM Ijaz, like you earlier alluded to, very important point about governance and lack of capacity building. When we talk about governance and institutions, NECTA was envisioned initially as a central counter-terror body, but it suffers from a lot of budget constraints as well as capacity building, and there is a lack of kind of political will as well. What kind of structural reforms are needed at this point in time to make it the nerve center of our fight against terrorism?
Well, to be honest, NECTA could never, become operational the way it was envisioned in papers. The core issues were that we have multiple intelligence agencies, for example, operating all over Pakistan. There is no mutual handshake. There is no sharing of information. There is no sharing and sifting timely, collating that information.
Coordination is very weak.
Exactly. This is because the disconnect is that law and order remains a provincial subject, and the NECTA is at the federal level. So there has to be a handshake with the provinces and with the districts, because that is where the threat is and that is where the solution lies. If the police is the best in any district or in any subdivision, even at union council level, they exactly know who is moving in or who is moving out of a house in a locality. They have their own informers, they have their own network. So if there is anything unusual, because this activity doesn't happen overnight.
Yes.
Attack of the magnitude of what we observed on Jaffar Express, for example, it doesn't, land, people do not land there from, paradrops and conduct the operation and get back airlifted. They come, they reside in the locality, the logistics are provided to them, and then they launch their operation through their handlers. So all these linkages can be observed and then broken down and taken head on at the local level if there is a sharing of information. So I think inherently lack political will to execute its mission, and secondly the coordination, which we do not have at the moment, because through discussions or through policy making, sitting,
we have everything on paper since 1997.
Exactly. Yeah. So we don't see its practical manifestation. We have to get out of the boardrooms, we have to get out of the PowerPoint presentations and go and see where the challenge is. I would say, why don't we, for example, convene our meetings right there in Balochistan? Why are we discussing the problem of Balochistan sitting in Islamabad? There are certain optics also. Just imagine if the government officials from representing the federation, they just have to move post a major event that carries no value. But if they are seen there in divisional level, at the provincial level, discussing, sorting out the operational modalities with the local and provincial governments, that will deter the enemy and the enemy's sleeper cells or the operators. Remember, the operators are local. In very few cases we will see the Afghan foreign footprint. The handlers, supporters, sponsors, they are all foreign, but ultimately the man who explodes as a suicide bomber, he or she is a local. Unfortunately.
Brainwashed by
So
terrorists.
we have ample time to see that radicalization of a person to that level where he or she is willing to sacrifice their life. So we have ample time in the locality, in the school, in the colleges, universities to thwart against those threats.
Right, very important points made by AVM Ijaz Malik, and now I want to take Rear Admiral Faisal Saab. When we talk about terrorism, of course, the human aspect of it is very important and remains a significant factor. But I want to take on the economic cost when we talk about Pakistan, terrorism has cost Pakistan $130 billion and slowed GDP growth. Given this, why has counter-terrorism not been an economic priority, for Pakistan so far?
I think Pakistan has been in this situation for the last many decades, and when you have some scourge fighting you for the last many decades, whatever you pour in is depleted or is taken away. So the real benefit of whenever we had an economic uptick in our economic situation, it could not be reaped because we are fighting this menace for so many decades, and so much is going into this. That's why Pakistan has been trying to convince so many other nations and states that this war is not the war of Pakistan only. This is a collective and joint menace for everybody, and we should. It mandates actually collaboration, coordination, and collective effort on part of everybody. You see, the terrorism had its roots. The terrorism in Pakistan had its roots in Afghanistan. And what happened to Afghanistan, everybody knows. How many countries were in Afghanistan fighting that war. So once they have left, now Pakistan is left alone. So all those countries are liable to pay attention to whatever we are suffering from terrorism inside our country. And that's how Pakistan has been asking them to support Pakistan in its fight against terrorism, because it's if God forbids Pakistan fails, this is not going to remain confined in the bounds of Pakistan. It is going to go beyond that.
Beyond borders.
So,
and we have, of course, witnessed that as well. I also want your take on the misinformation when we talk about terrorism. And one of the recent reports by World Economic Forums flags misinformation as a top global risk. And when we talk about in context of Pakistan, how do you see we can build counter narratives where most of our social media users are young people under the age of 35, and of course these terrorist groups are exploiting the youth?
That's what, when I say that we need to include people in this war, is most important. You see, in May 2025, between India and Pakistan conflict, there was citizen journalism that came up. People were themselves supporting the narrative of government of Pakistan and Pakistan Armed Forces. They were making their own memes, they were making their own videos, not highlighting the movements of the armed forces. They were so responsible to that aspect also. So a very responsible citizen journalism was very obvious during those days. And that's what people around the world outside Pakistan believed in, what Pakistani government or Pakistani state media were saying. Because you see, we have only very few English language channels. India has around 40 English language channels, or even more than that. So around the world, people were listening to them more than us. But this was our responsible citizen journalism that actually made people realize that what was happening on the ground. So
that very social media can be exploited and was being exploited by these terrorist organizations. How do we counter that?
Yes, I am coming to that point. That you see, if people believe in the cause, if people know what is actually happening, and if people know that this is their own war, they are going to help government of Pakistan, they are going to help law enforcement agencies through any means, even social media. They are not going to fall prey to the terrorist trap. They are not, because they will be aware of what is happening and what is their modus operandi. So we need to make people aware of whatever is happening. That is what is my point right from the beginning, that we need to include public into this, uh, and we need to have them in our fold. You see, one important thing besides misinformation, terrorism doesn't flourish without local support, because they have to find hideouts, they have to travel hundreds of kilometers with all their wherewithal, they have to attack and they have
Right.
to get back. So these all things somebody is seeing, somebody is watching them. So uh, people form the center of gravity for terrorists. And center of gravity is something without which your mission is not accomplished in military terms. So
Right.
if people are center of gravity of the terrorists, we need to separate this center of gravity from them. And we need to have this center of gravity in our fold. That's how they will left abundant, and terrorists will be abundant, and they will be high and dry, and then we can easily tackle with them.
Right, right. And finally, Ambassador Naqvi, I want to take on what would be your blueprint for this fight against terrorism, for ensuring that the sacrifices of our citizens as well as our security personnel translate into sustainable peace for Pakistan and beyond borders?
You know, Maria, the most important thing that we must work for, the objective, is to improve the economic lot of these people. Once they have jobs and they have security of employment and enough money for their needs, I think the appeal of the terrorist organizations will diminish. Now, there are three examples in my mind that the countries that have dealt with terrorism. One is Sri Lanka, the other is Turkey, which had a very strong Kurdish terrorist problem. And different from our two countries, which are similar to us, developing countries, then there is the UK, which dealt with the IRA. So there are three examples of what countries have dealt with. I think we have to look at all those, we have to develop a strategy, we have to involve the local people, and we should be prepared for kinetic action and military approach. All together, as I said in the very beginning, that this is a multi-pronged problem which needs a multi-pronged solution. And therefore, we have to develop, and most important, even more important, is the determination of the government, which has been talked about. Right. The will of the government to deal with the terrorist problem. It's very sad that these days again we are having daily occurrences. Yes. And you know, the people in Islamabad or in the major capitals are not affected, so they don't worry about it. We have to worry about it, because this can spread and it can cause a lot of harm to the population at large, and also to the state as a whole.
Of course, we have to deal with this menace of terrorism head on, and you quoted three examples, but Pakistan also remains one of the countries that other countries can take lessons from as far as the fight against terrorism is concerned. Thank you very much, Ambassador Retired Ali Sarwar Naqvi, for joining us in today's program and for your valuable input. Thank you very much, AVM Ijaz Malik, for joining us in today's discussion and for your valuable input. Thank you very much, Rear Admiral Retired Faisal Shah, for joining us in today's program and for your valuable input. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.